Daniel Mercer had been warned about alien royalty. He had been given protocols, rituals, a stack of cultural handbooks that weighed more than the shuttle's fuel cells, and an official handbook titled Asterisk, Interstellar Diplomacy for Fragile Species. He had read none of it, not entirely because he was lazy, though he was, but because most of the text had been written in bureaucratic legalese so thick it might have required a laser drill to get through. Still, he was confident enough. Humans had done this before: handshake, exchange trinkets, sign treaties, get politely escorted back to orbit. Easy, but he had not been warned about long ears. When the doors of the crystal chamber slid open and Queen Velara stepped in, Daniel's brain failed to process anything beyond those ears. They were elegant, elongated, arching high and tapering gracefully, tipped with silver caps that glittered under the chamber's artificial starlight. They framed a face otherwise almost human: sharp cheekbones, eyes bright with intelligence and amusement, lips curled into a smile that had the kind of confidence only an empire-spanning monarch could muster. Daniel bowed as deeply as the handbook diagrams had instructed: 35 degrees for royalty, 40 for supreme royalty, stop at 39 to avoid appearing desperate. He managed a respectable 37. The Queen did not bow back. Instead, she leaned forward, her long ears twitching ever so slightly, and said, "You got me pregnant, human." The chamber went so silent that Daniel swore he could hear the humming of the coolant systems running through the throne room walls. His brain refused the input, tried again, then refused a second time. He blinked. "I what?" Her grin widened, and she clasped her hands behind her back like someone delivering the punchline to a well-practiced joke. "Pregnant. With child, offspring. A royal heir with inconveniently short ears, probably. Yours." A cough came from the far side of the chamber. It was the Velari Chancellor, a tall alien whose ears were braided like ceremonial ropes. His expression suggested that he would rather eject himself into the nearest singularity than be present at this moment. Daniel straightened slowly, scanning the faces around the room. Dozens of Velari nobles stared at him with an intensity that could probably burn through bulkheads. Some looked horrified, others looked scandalized. At least one looked like he was trying very hard not to laugh. Daniel cleared his throat. I think there's been a clerical error. I don't recall, submitting any material." The Queen tilted her head, ears flicking in mock offense. "Do you think my biology runs on paperwork, humans? Always so administrative, so fragile, like little diplomats made of glass." He tried to gather words, but they came out in a jumble. "Look, Your Majesty, I assure you, I've never even, this is, well, biologically improbable at the very least." "Improbable," she echoed, her smile now playful mischief. "Yes, improbable, unlikely, shocking. Yet here we are. You should see your face. It's delightful. Do all humans turn the color of reactor coolant when embarrassed?" "I'm not embarrassed," Daniel lied, as his cheeks radiated heat like a dying star. The Queen laughed, a sound like crystalline bells shaken in microgravity. She turned to her court. "See. Already he denies reality, as all good consorts do. Perfect training for politics." Daniel gawked. "Consort, I didn't, there wasn't, nobody asked me." "Oh, relax," she interrupted, waving one long-fingered hand. "It's not as though you're being dragged to the altar. Not yet." Her eyes sparkled, and for a moment Daniel could not tell if she was joking. He prayed she was joking. The Chancellor cleared his throat again, visibly dying inside. "Your Majesty, perhaps this revelation is not suitable for a diplomatic session of such import." "Nonsense," the Queen said, silencing him with a flick of her ears. "Diplomacy thrives on revelations, and jokes, especially jokes. If one cannot laugh while governing, one goes mad." She turned back to Daniel. "And you, dear human, are far too amusing to keep hidden." Daniel wanted to sink into the crystalline floor and disappear into the planet's mantle. He considered briefly whether feigning a sudden medical emergency might earn him a shuttle ride home. Unfortunately, Human physiology was apparently too sturdy for fainting on command. One of the nobles finally spoke, voice sharp as a plasma blade. "Your Majesty, if this is true, then the bloodline—" "Oh, hush," the queen said, dismissing him with a flick. "The bloodline will survive, it always does. A child with both my brilliance and his," she gestured vaguely at Daniel. "Whatever it is he contributes will surely be magnificent." Daniel lifted a hand. "For the record, humans contribute a lot. We built entire orbital colonies out of recycled soda cans." That unexpectedly drew a ripple of laughter through the chamber. Even the Chancellor cracked what looked dangerously close to a smile. The Queen beamed. "See. Already he charms the court with self-deprecation. I told you he was perfect." Daniel muttered, "This wasn't in the handbook." The Queen stepped closer, until her shadow fell over him like a solar eclipse. Her voice softened just enough that only he could hear. "Don't look so terrified, Daniel Mercer. I may jest, but this matter is very real, and it is not scandal but opportunity. For you, for me, for both our worlds." Her breath brushed his ear as she added, with another mischievous curl of her lips, "And besides, you humans really are astonishingly efficient at reproduction." Daniel's knees almost buckled. The chamber erupted again, nobles debating, the Chancellor groaning into his hands, courtiers whispering theories that would spread across the galaxy by nightfall. Daniel stood frozen, still trying to decide if this was the worst diplomatic disaster in human history or the strangest first date ever recorded. Daniel had always thought he could handle pressure. He had survived training simulators that dropped him into simulated reactor breaches, trade disputes between corporations that made Death Stars look reasonable, and once a dinner party with 3 admirals who all despised each other. But none of that experience prepared him for waking up the next morning to discover that every newsfeed across the Perseus arm now referred to him as the human consort. He stared at the projection hovering above his breakfast tray. His own face, frozen mid-blink, next to a regal portrait of Queen Velara, her long ears elegantly curved like golden crescents. A headline scrolled across in bold violet letters, "A royal heir with questionable ears." Daniel groaned and slapped the tray controls, shutting it off. "This is fine. I'll just crawl into an escape pod and launch myself into deep space. Nobody will notice." The chamber's door slid open with a hiss, and the Queen herself strolled in, as if she owned not just the palace but the entire concept of mornings. Which in a way she did. "Still alive, I see," she said cheerfully. "Good. I'd hate to announce my consort's tragic demise after only one night of fame. Very bad for my approval ratings." Daniel sat up, running a hand through his hair. "You could at least pretend this isn't the most humiliating moment of my entire species' history." She tilted her head, ears twitching like antennae catching cosmic static. "Humiliating. No, 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 hilarious. There's a difference." She sauntered closer and plucked a piece of toast from his tray without asking. "Besides, the people adore scandal. Empires are built on drama. Do you think they wrote opera about tax reforms? No, Daniel. They wrote about love affairs, betrayals, pregnancies, and occasionally exploding moons." He rubbed his face. "I just wanted to negotiate a trade deal." "And you shall," she said between bites. "But now you'll negotiate from a far more interesting position. You're not just some bland envoy from a fragile little world. You are the asterisk father of the future. That title comes with quite a bit of influence. And free dessert at most state banquets." The door hissed again, and in marched the Chancellor, looking as though someone had strapped him to an asteroid and dragged him through a plasma storm. His ears drooped heavily, braided cords bouncing with every step. "Your Majesty," he said through clenched teeth, "the entire court is in uproar. The council demands clarification. The noble houses demand genetic proof. And the media demands photographs." He gave Daniel a look that suggested he would rather wrestle a black hole than share the same air as him. Velara beamed. "Wonderful. Let them demand. The more they demand, the more they talk. The more they talk, the more they normalize. By the end of the week, they'll be debating baby names instead of succession crises. Daniel raised his hand weakly. About this whole baby thing, I mean, are we absolutely sure? Because, and forgive me for saying this, I don't actually remember the part where. The Queen cut him off with a playful smirk. Ah, yes, your human memory, always so selective. Rest assured, Daniel Mercer, this child is real. And so is your role. The Chancellor pinched the bridge of his long nose. This is a diplomatic disaster. This is comedy, the Queen corrected, tossing Daniel a wink. Within hours, Daniel found himself paraded before the council. The great chamber shimmered with holographic banners of starlight, and nobles in elaborate robes leaned forward, ears like sails catching every word. They grilled him mercilessly, demanding explanations for human biology. Do humans hatch their offspring? One asked. No, Daniel snapped. Do they emerge from spores? Another pressed. Also no. Then how do you reproduce? Daniel hesitated, cheeks warming. Very carefully. The chamber erupted in laughter. Even some of the stiffest nobles cracked grins, while others scribbled notes as if they had just been handed sacred wisdom. The Queen, of course, clapped her hands in delight. See, isn't he charming? She declared, my choice of consort is clearly inspired. Daniel wanted the floor to swallow him, but instead he forced a smile and muttered, glad to be of service. That night gossip spread through the empire faster than tachyon pulses. Artists began sketching playful renditions of half-human heirs with awkwardly short ears. Merchants started selling Consort Daniel dolls that blushed when squeezed. By morning, someone had written a song titled Asterisk, the human who stole the Queen's heart accidentally. When Daniel heard it playing in the palace corridors, he groaned. I didn't steal anything. Velara only laughed, her ears swaying gracefully. Oh, Daniel, you've stolen the galaxy's attention. Isn't that better than trade agreements? He buried his face in his hands. This is going to kill me. Don't be so dramatic, she teased. If it kills you, I'll simply declare you a martyr. Statues everywhere, very flattering cheekbones. And despite himself, she smirked. Partially, but mostly because, for once, I'm not alone. Do you have any idea how dull it is to rule when everyone either fears you, flatters you, or plots against you? And then here comes this human envoy who blushes when asked about biology and complains about armed fruit. You remind me that the universe can still be funny. Daniel looked at her, ears glowing faintly in starlight, and for the first time he saw something beyond the crown and laughter, something almost human. Vulnerable, honest, he cleared his throat. So, what you're saying is I'm comic relief. Precisely, she said with a grin. My favorite character type. He groaned, great, I left Earth for this. But despite his words, he found himself smiling too. By the time they returned to the throne world, the gossip had grown louder, the political factions bolder, and Daniel's role even more precarious. Yet somewhere between the absurdity and the danger, he realized something terrifying. He wasn't just the Queen's accidental scandal anymore. He was becoming her ally. And judging from the way her long ears twitched whenever she laughed at his grumbling, maybe something more. Daniel had expected politics to be dull, endless speeches, too much etiquette, and enough ceremonial robes to suffocate a moon. What he got instead was a coup attempt in the middle of a dinner party. The banquet had been lavish even by Velari standards. Crystal chandeliers that floated in midair, servers on magnetic skates weaving between long tables, and a centerpiece made of living vines that sprouted glowing blossoms every time someone toasted. Daniel was halfway through, nervously poking at a suspiciously twitching seafood dish when the lights flickered. The chandeliers dimmed, the vines shriveled, and from the balcony above, nobles in ornate robes drew weapons that hummed like angry stars. By decree of the true lineage, one of them shouted, we denounce this human corruption of our throne. Daniel froze with a fork halfway to his mouth. Oh, great, here comes the assassination, and I didn't even get dessert. The queen, sitting calmly beside him, leaned over and whispered, "If they kill me, make sure they spell my name correctly on the statues." Then she rose with a regal grace that made even armed rebels hesitate. "Really?" She called up to them, her long ears twitching with mock annoyance. "During dinner, could you not wait until dessert? At least let the human try the caramel nebula pudding. It's his first time." Daniel lifted a hand. Second time." But yes, still would have liked pudding. The leader snarled, "Your mockery shames this empire." "Mockery is what keeps it alive," she shot back. "Otherwise we'd all be as joyless as your speeches." Blasters lit up the hall. Nobles screamed, scattering like frightened birds. Daniel dove under the table, clutching the twitching seafood like it was a shield. The queen, however, simply tilted her head, murmured a command into her bracelet, and a shimmering shield dome blossomed around her with a crackle of energy. Daniel peeked out. "You couldn't, I don't know, make the shield bigger. Maybe big enough to include your very fragile human consort." She smirked. "Oh, fine, scoot closer." He scrambled to her side just as plasma bolts ricocheted off the dome. "This is not how trade negotiations are supposed to go," he shouted. "This isn't a negotiation," she said, her eyes narrowing. "This is theater." The chandeliers brightened suddenly as palace guards stormed in, sleek exosuits glinting, long rifles hissing with charged rounds. The rebels met them with ceremonial daggers that extended into energy blades. The hall erupted into chaos. Daniel ducked as a dagger-wielding noble lunged at the shield. "The baby will never rule." The man snarled. Daniel yelled, "Technically, I'm not even sure their asterisk is asterisk a baby." The queen laughed, even as her shield rippled from the impact. "Excellent line delivery, Daniel. Very convincing." "Not trying to be convincing, trying to stay alive." She pressed her bracelet again, and the shield expanded outward in a sudden pulse that sent the rebels sprawling. The guards seized the opportunity, subduing them with stunning bolts and binding their wrists with glowing restraints. When the last rebel hit the floor, silence returned. Broken glass glittered across the floor like starlight. The queen straightened her gown, brushing imaginary dust from her sleeves, and turned to Daniel. "Well," she said brightly, "that was exciting. You can check survived assassination attempt off your cultural education list." Daniel stared at her wide-eyed. "You're insane." "Correct," she replied cheerfully. The chancellor stumbled in moments later, looking as though he had aged 20 years in 5 minutes. "Your Majesty, are you harmed?" "Consort Daniel, are you harmed?" His tone suggested he wouldn't have minded if the answer to the second question had been yes. "We're fine," Daniel said flatly, "except I never got pudding." The queen patted his shoulder. "See. Already scarred for life." Later, as they walked through the palace's emergency corridors, dim tunnels lit by pulsing red strips, Daniel finally asked the question gnawing at him. "Why aren't you more worried? They tried to kill you. Us. The whole throne." She gave him a sideways glance, her long ears drooping slightly for once. "Because I've lived my entire reign with daggers at my back, but laughter confuses them. It unsettles. And besides," she added with a mischievous grin, "it keeps you from panicking too much." "I'm still panicking," he muttered, "less than before." They reached the command room, where holograms of the Empire's star systems flickered across the air. Advisors buzzed around, issuing orders. The Chancellor muttered grimly about purges and treason trials. Daniel folded his arms. "So what happens now?" The Queen clasped her hands behind her back, her voice firm but still threaded with humor. "Now we win. Because nothing unites an empire like a common enemy. And right now, that enemy is not you, dear human. It's the fools who thought rebellion would look impressive." Daniel stared at her, realizing once again that beneath her jokes and flamboyance, there was a mind sharper than any blade in the room. "Still," he said slowly, "maybe we could schedule the next assassination attempt after lunch. I hate fighting on an empty stomach." She burst out laughing, her ears twitching wildly. "Oh, Daniel, you're finally learning how to be royal." The coronation hall smelled faintly of ozone, as if the very walls remembered the blaster fire of the failed coup. But now the chamber was dressed in splendor. Holographic banners shimmered in cascading colors, planets twinkled in miniature above the assembly, and nobles sat in uneasy rows, whispering like insects trapped under glass. Daniel stood off to the side, tugging uncomfortably at the collar of his new ceremonial uniform, tailored, gold-trimmed, and very itchy. The queen entered with all the confidence of someone who had survived rebellion, scandal, and Daniel's constant complaints. Her long ears glowed faintly under the lights, adorned with golden chains that jingled softly as she walked. Every noble in the chamber rose. Daniel, belatedly realizing he should follow suit, nearly tripped on his own boots as he scrambled upright. The chancellor announced in a voice that echoed across the galaxy, "Behold Queen Velara, sovereign of the Velari Empire." And at her side, he hesitated, visibly choking on the words, "the human consort." Daniel raised a hand in a half-wave. Hi." A ripple of laughter moved through the chamber. Some nobles looked scandalized, others looked reluctantly charmed. Daniel felt his ears burn. The queen smiled, letting the amusement settle before raising her voice. "My people, my council, my empire, tonight we mark a turning. Our enemies tried to divide us. They whispered that my choice, my scandal, my child would bring only ruin. But here I stand, unruined, undefeated, and unamused by their melodrama." Daniel leaned toward her and muttered, "You seem pretty amused to me." She ignored him. "This union is not weakness. It is proof that the galaxy is larger than tradition, richer than fear. A half-human heir will not dilute our strength, it will expand it. It will bind worlds together. And if anyone doubts that," she gestured at Daniel, "then you clearly haven't spoken to him long enough to appreciate the comedy of it all." The chamber laughed again, more genuine this time. Daniel groaned softly. "I'm a punchline with a uniform." "Yes," she whispered, "but an asterisk punchline that survived an assassination attempt. That makes you legendary." After the speeches, after the formalities, came the signing of the new treaty, one that Daniel had once thought would be the sole purpose of his mission. Now it was almost an afterthought. Holographic quills hovered,